This is really, really fascinating.
Yeah,
So an op-ed in the New York Times, you know, we've been trying to closely follow what's going on with AI, what's going on with ChatGPT, Bing, all of that stuff. So Noam Chomsky, in conjunction with two others, wrote an op-ed for the New York Times about their view of these large language models, including Google's Bard and Microsoft's Sydney. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen from the New York Times. The headline here is Noam Chomsky, the false promise of ChatGPT. And their view is essentially, you know, there's a lot of sensationalist headlines about ChatGPT and about what all of this means for the future, and people even sort of, you know, insinuating that they're not sentient, but they're getting close to having that sort of human reasoning and understanding that's much more complex and much more sophisticated than anything we've seen before. And these three are really pumping the brakes on that notion. Now, Noam Chomsky, being a linguist, a language expert, looking at the ways that what ChatGPT is doing is fundamentally different from the way that humans speak and reason and the way that human, you know, even morality works. Let me read you a little bit of this so you can get a sense of it. It's very thought-provoking. Honestly, I don't know what I think about all of these things, so that's why I just want to put all the views on the table as we sort of sort through what is what and what it means for the future. They say, OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Bard, and Microsoft's Sydney are marvels of machine learning. Roughly speaking, they take huge amounts of data, search for patterns in it, and become increasingly proficient at generating statistically probable outputs, such as seemingly human-like language and thought. These programs have been hailed as the first glimmers on the horizon of artificial general intelligence, that long prophesied moment when mechanical minds surpass human brains, not only quantitatively in terms of processing speed and memory, but also qualitatively in terms of intellectual insight, artistic creativity, and every other distinctively human faculty. And that's the part they really push back on the piece. They go on, that day may come, but its dawn is not yet breaking. Contrary to what can be read in hyperbolic headlines and reckoned by injudicious investments, is this Borgesian? I don't know what that word is.
I think
I gotta look that one up.
I believe that's is a reference to a philosopher.
Okay.
The Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges.
Okay.
I'm probably saying that.
Borgesian revelation we'll go with, of understanding has not and will not, and we submit cannot occur if machine learning programs like ChatGPT continue to dominate the field of AI. However useful these programs might be in some narrow domains, we know from the science of linguistics and the philosophy of knowledge that they differ profoundly from how humans reason and use language. These differences place significant limitations on what these programs can do, encoding them with ineradicable defects. They talk about a number of areas where they see them as really deficient and, you know, not even close to approximating what a human mind can do. One of them is on morality. And you can see this in some of the fights over, like, you know, they're framed as like, oh, is ChatGPT woke or whatever. But the deeper level question is any morality is programmed in by human beings.
Exactly. Yeah, and I actually thought there was a really poignant part where he says, quote, the human mind is not like ChatGPT and its ilk, a lumbering statistical engine for pattern matching, gorging on hundreds of terabytes of data and extrapolating the most likely conversational response. On the contrary, the human mind is a surprisingly efficient and even elegant system that operates with small amounts of information. It seeks not to infer brute correlations amongst data points, but to create explanations. He points to how a young child acquiring a language is developing unconsciously, automatically, and speedily from actually minuscule amounts of data, from grammar and a stupendously sophisticated system of logical principles and parameters. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly which of these areas that I fall onto, but
yeah.
One quote I found especially important from Chomsky was this, quote, the human mind is not like ChatGPT and its ilk, a lumbering statistical engine or a pattern matching, gorging on hundreds of terabytes of data, extrapolating the most likely conversational response or most probable answer to a scientific question. On the contrary, the human mind is a surprisingly efficient and even elegant system that operates with small amounts of information. It seeks not to infer brute correlations amongst data points, but to create explanations. So I actually thought it was a really interesting piece, the way that he lays it out. And I'm of two minds. On the one hand, you know, I believe very much in technology, very much in the ability for technological innovation to surprise us. And sometimes I think it's difficult for people to even conceive of like what it would look like in the future. You know, the famous Henry Ford quote where he's like, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, because they couldn't even conceive of like what a combustible automobile would look like. On the other, we should also have some hubris about like, oh, our human mind, which has evolved over millions of years through selective evolution and, you know, in a very complex process across billions and billions of people that have lived now throughout the world, can be so easily replicated through a statistical pattern recognition regime. I actually thought he was correct, which is, yeah, I think in some areas like rote data, computer programming, things that are completely linear, that don't require as much creativity, totally, I think he's right. Those are the ones where it will be most effective. But in terms of like a full-scale takeover, well, I'm not so sure. On the other hand, you could take a Matrix point of view where our humanity and our, like, you know, quote-unquote efficiency actually keeps us away from operating at the most efficient level, which would enable us to have takeover. So I really don't know where I stand on it. It's kind of interesting, though.
You know, I was reminded as I was reading this of Derek Thompson, friend of the show, interviewed Kevin Roose of the New York Times, who is the one who had that really bizarre, like, Sydney conversation where the ChatGPT, Bing, Microsoft thing starts professing its love. And everyone's like, oh, my God, what is going on here? So anyway, Derek was interviewing Kevin, and he asked him this question, which I thought was a really good one, which is, you know, with the self-driving cars, it has turned out to be very, 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 very difficult to get the last pieces. You can get it like 95% of the way there, but then there are parts of driving that effectively require in the moment human judgment of ambiguous situations and novel situations. And so he asked him, do you have kind of a similar type problem with ChatGPT, where you can get like a lot, you can do some things that are really impressive and get a lot of the way there, but there's this last 10% that is just an almost unsolvable problem. And it seems to me that that's kind of what Chomsky is laying out here. And it's not like, okay, if you keep going, you know, what's the new version? Is this going to be like ChatGPT 4 or whatever that's coming out? As long as you are using this basic model of just taking in all of these inputs and then using a probability to predict what the next like thing for the chat bot to say would be, there's going to be hard limitations and you will never get all of the way there. There will always be a limit to how far you're able to go, even as you improve it and improve it and improve it. And that seems correct to me. Now, on the other hand, I think that even with what they've designed here, it could be potentially revolutionary. Like, you don't have to get all of the way there for it still to be a revolutionary technology. And I mean that in both the positive and negative sense. One really clear implication to me is with regard to the industry of journalism, where if you have ChatGPT able to do a decent job, a 90, 95% decent job of aggregating all of the information about a news story that's out there and putting it on the search results rather than people having to click through, well, that one innovation in and of itself completely upends the business model of journalism. So I guess I see both the limitations, but I also think that even as it exists now, it could be potentially transformational in certain spaces.
So I actually think the perfect analogy is self-driving, as you said. So I've been in a Tesla that was going full self-driving, and look, I'm gonna be honest, like, it was a mess. And the reason why is it was not able to compute, and this is, I'm talking on city streets, not on the highway. So we're talking like, it didn't know, for example, that one lane is closed during rush hour. So it goes you into that lane.
Oh, God.
But people are parked there during this time. And so then it has to wait to move over. And then in terms of turning left, it didn't read properly, but there were a bunch of different lights. Here in Washington area, we have these ridiculous systems. And so it reads one as a green light, which is beyond the green. Now, look, these are all problems that maybe can be solved. But also what you said was important. That doesn't mean, though, that the car can't still drive itself for hours on the highway. That's pretty nice. That's actually a huge change to the driving experience.
Right.
So if you're driving 5 hours and you only have to drive, and you're driving almost entirely on a highway, you're only actually driving for, let's say, 10% of that time. That revolutionizes the road trip. That doesn't mean that it changes your daily commute in the city. So that's one of those where you can actually still go very far. The technology is very impressive, but you're not 100% of the way. I no longer have to look at my car type thing, which was the original promise. So I actually, yeah, we probably just more need to calibrate your expectations.
Yeah, so one projection in terms of upending the workforce is like lawyers, who a lot of what their work is doing is like taking some previous document that they used for some previous situation, going through it, inserting in just like the new company name or the new language into this already pre-prepared document. An AI could probably do that pretty effectively.
Yeah.
But even within that, you're still going to have instances where it's a little complex. You got to actually rework this paragraph a little. It doesn't quite make sense because this company was different from this company and their situation is a little bit different in ways that are nuanced and complicated and that an AI isn't really prepared to be able to handle, in the same way that, you know, the self-driving thing falls apart when there's a sign that just got put up that day of like, well, if you drive in this lane, you know, you're going to get a ticket or whatever. So I think it will still require a human being to then go in and look at like, okay, well, did they get everything? Does this make sense, et cetera? But even just the simple fact of automating all of that early grunt work, well, that's going to profoundly change the legal profession, because instead of all of those hours that they spend typically going through and like reworking these documents, 90% of that done by the AI, and then you're just coming in after the fact and doing like an edit job. So that's, as best as I can figure these things out, that's how I see it right now, but I could be totally wrong about any of this and what it means and where it's going.
But that's why it's fun. It's fun to be on the forefront.
That's why it's fascinating, yeah.
It feels like it's like 1995, and you're like, hey, the internet.
What is internet? Yeah.
There's actually some wild, I recommend people go and watch, there's all these documentaries from the 90s about how people thought the internet was going to be. And there was this two parallels. There was like web internet and then the information superhighway, about how you would use your TV to like stream devices. And they were onto something, but the idea was that the TV would be like hooked up to the dial-up and there would, anyway, it's really fascinating. That's how Bill Gates actually thought that the internet was gonna go. So people should go back and watch, you know, how, as wrong as they were, you could see how, you know, it was a reasonable idea at the time.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.